All right, we are live. So, welcome everybody. My name is Bryant Alexander. I am the CEO and founder of Reframe Coaching and Consulting. And I have a very, very special guest today. I have Alex Couture, who is the founder of Dinner Growth, and we're going to get to know about him. He's a three-time founder. He has an amazing story. He's all about growth. He's all about perspective, and he's all about the underdog story, telling that underdog story. And we're going to take the time to get to know him, his background, the work that he does with startups. But Alex, I did a little bit of an intro, but I feel like you can introduce yourself better than I can. So, Alex, just please tell me a little bit about yourself, your background, and just your journey to dinner growth.
Yeah. So, well, first and foremost, thanks for giving me the platform. And it's been just so nice watching you develop your business over LinkedIn. I'm just glad that network is there to connect guys like us. So thank you
Mhm.
for the forum. Um, this is the hard part about going live and doing pods. Like, you and I were just chuckling moments ago about how like I went years of never doing these to
Mhm.
done like 5 or 6 now in the last couple of weeks.
Mhm.
Um, I find it hard to talk about myself, easier about my journey, but let me try to give this a crack. So born and raised in Toronto, Canada. Um, that's where, home is for us.
Mhm.
Um, if I think about sort of just my professional journey, at the core, I'm a sales guy. Like
Gotcha.
I've been in tech sales my entire life. When I was 20, I had a great influence from a guy who had worked in Hong Kong at IBM.
Mhm.
And as trivial or as shallow as this might sound, is he just looked rich. Like he had, he like looked that part. And I remember very clearly coming back from Hong Kong when I was 20 some odd years old, thinking I need to get into tech sales
Mhm.
because that was like the definition for me at the time.
Oh, you learned
And
early.
so, yeah, I
Yeah.
like at least I was impressioned early. And
Mhm.
so at the time, Brian, you'll appreciate this. I literally come back to Toronto. I just graduated from school, went to college. Mom is all over me saying, "Alex, get a job, get a job, get a job." And in my brain, I'm like, I know exactly what I'm gonna do.
Yep.
And so I took to monster.com and I still remember it like it was yesterday. I'm like in the search bar, I put in IT sales.
That's a
And hey,
throwback.
I
Monster.com is a throwback.
remember
That's
that
a real
joint.
throwback.
And so I hit enter, and the first thing that comes up with this three-letter acronym CDW. And I remember I was on like Yahoo. I'm like searching what CDW is, and it
Mhm.
looks like it sells everything under the sun that an enterprise would need from a technology perspective, like
Mhm.
hardware, software, services. It did it all. So I hit apply. Long story made short, I get the job. It's based in Chicago, and it was a transformative part of my life because it's really where I developed my passion for the science and the sport of sales.
Mhm.
And then on the heels of that, like really becoming curious about solving customer problems.
Mhm.
And that was like the launch point to my entire career. Like it CDW showed me what good looked like. It showed me what good sales enablement looked like. What do
Gotcha.
good sales professionals behave like and look like? And so I did that for about 8 years. And then from there, I actually met my co-founder, Adrian Bubalo, who had the idea of building a mobile capable, what we call mobile first experience for note taking applications. So
Interesting.
follow me for a second.
All
So
right.
we're in 2011, and he had this idea of building a mobile app that would really do three things: snap a picture, create content on or around that image, and be able to send it to somebody. And
Okay.
I'm sure you're already thinking, like, dude, like that's like cornerstone to everything we do today, right?
Yeah,
Like
that's everything.
our
Yep.
kids, my
Yep.
12 and 10-year-old, like they chuckle at the idea that
Mhm.
we had back in 2011. But anyway, from an IT background, Adrian's thoughts were, hey, we should use this in the workflow of like IT help desk. So think about when the Bank of America is rolling out 10,000 new laptops to their staff around the US,
Mm-hmm.
and things go wrong. IT techs have to show up. They, at that time in 2010, would go to their laptop bag, snap a picture of the issue, go
Yep.
back to their laptop, marry some note through an email client, and then send it to IT help desk for resolution.
Yep.
And so Adrian was like, hey, we can do all of that using one of these. It's 2010 now. Everybody's starting to carry these things. We should build a mobile app for that. So we did that. Two crazy guys. We put our money together. We built a B2C application called Picky Note. So it
Oh, you know,
it did what it sounded like.
it's
And
catchy. It's definitely
it's
catchy. So
catchy,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah, for
So
sure.
we started building this thing on the BlackBerry platform because, again, two guys coming from enterprise sales, we were like, BlackBerry at the time owned the
Mm-hmm.
enterprise. And anyway, we one day get an email through our support queue for Picky Note, and it happens to be a deputy director of a federal law enforcement agency in the US.
Okay,
And
this
he
is a
says,
good
hey,
thing or a
listen,
bad thing.
yeah, this is crazy. So he says, hey, I'm a user of Picky Note. We just bought these 200 BlackBerry playbooks or so for our federal agents. And it would be really cool if we had a piece of software that we could use on those playbooks to
Mm-hmm.
process a crime scene. And for me, it was like light bulbs went off. I'm like, okay, this is a market we can go out and serve. We can have repeatability in how we go to market, and we can
Mm-hmm.
create a real software company around selling to police around the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what was the foundation to our SaaS-based startup called SceneDoc.
Okay,
And in
wait.
2000, yeah, yeah,
Wait,
yeah. I'll stop.
wait. Before, so Picky Note. So how long was Picky Note going before that officer reached out to you? How many years in between was it? Like what?
It
How
wasn't
long was
years, it was months. It was
months?
months upon a release, and it was a horrible piece of software, right? Like, like any early software, it was
Yeah.
buggy, it had its issues. So I think it was like God's graces that had this
Mhm.
guy, A, using it, but B, like having enough desire to reach out to us.
Yeah, and so like, how many people were using it at the time? Uh, between like before that officer reached out to you,
We're talking hundreds. Like, we were
hundreds.
into the hundreds of downloads, so it wasn't even into thousands of downloads.
Hundreds is
So he
still
was
good.
certainly an early adopter, but he was certainly
Yeah.
an early adopter by every definition of the book, you know?
Okay, got you. Okay. So the Picking Notes becomes a success. And then now what happens?
It wasn't a financial success. It was a success in that it led us to this gentleman, Dr. Ed Espinoza, who, again, was really like the guy who exposed the larger business idea to Adrian and I,
Okay.
and it was then that we said, hey, we're going to go out and embark on this journey to transform Picky Note into the first version of what we called mobile CSI.
Got you.
And our company transformed eventually into being called SceneDoc. And that
Okay.
business was 100% focused on really redefining the role of mobile technology in public safety. So you think about first responders.
Yep.
We had this saying at the company that, like, first responders are first at the scene, but last to have access to the tech they need.
Got
I
you.
mean, if you look at the belt of a police officer, let alone a soldier in a field, not much
Hmm.
has changed in their gear over the last 100 years.
Hmm.
So when we thought about in 2011 introducing these as part of core public safety operations, like, think about what a police officer has to do when they get to a scene of an incident. They have to document things. They have to take notes. They have to write reports, copious amounts of reports,
Hmm.
and all of that stuff can be done in a really streamlined way using one of these.
Hmm.
Right. So the next sort of year or two of our journey was staying in the trenches, being as close as we could to officers, and really learning about what a day in the life of an officer is like. And then, hey,
Wow.
how do we safely empower them to use one of these to save just enormous amounts of time?
Okay. So research and really understanding, the customer problem, what they were going through. So what did that look like? Like, would you just literally follow them around all day, like figuring out, like, all right, how are you going through?
Yeah.
What's your process?
So Dr. Ed Espinoza was great in its as a first customer because he
Mhm.
exposed us to the 200 agents that were using our software on their playbook. So that was a
Mhm.
tremendous avenue for learning. But yeah, it did in 2011 require us to get on planes and go and see
Mhm.
customers and do what we call ride-alongs, which is essentially what it sounds like. I'm in the car with a couple of officers running a shift,
Okay.
and I would watch them engage with our software. And I was no product manager, but I was certainly like, I was intense about learning. I was like
Uh-huh.
feverish. I mean, I'm like that with most things in my life. Once I like attach myself and my brain to something, I want to learn everything about it. And
Same.
so I
Yeah.
wanted to learn everything that an officer went through.
Mhm.
And I wanted to learn how they would engage with the cell phone. I wanted to learn how they engage with our apps. And then I
Mhm.
wanted to learn how do we do all of that safely? Because at the end of the day, like what I learned actually in doing those ride alongs is some of the most dangerous parts of an officer's day is actually standing on the side of the road,
Okay. Got you.
right? Like because that's just where a lot of in the line of duty deaths happen.
Okay.
And
Got you.
so there was just like a huge element of learning
Got
about
you.
what that user group, how they would interact with the tech.
Okay. So we're in this evolution. So you're doing ride-alongs. You're really getting into the I guess the nitty-gritty of like where this application can grow, how this application can grow. So what's next for you, or what happens with this application? Like what's the transition after that?
So, well, what happened was about couple years of mistake, right? Like
Hmm.
I mean, I can spend, that's where you and I know that. Like I spend a lot of time now reflecting on the mistakes I made there, right? And actually,
Hmm.
that's the thesis to what started Dana Growth, my
Yeah.
consulting and advisory company now, right?
Hmm.
Because what I'm trying to do now with my life's work is how do I help other early stage tech founders avoid the mistakes I made?
Hmm.
Because Lord knows that if I could help them shave off 10% of the mistakes I've made,
Hmm.
that's going to be a catalyst to them growing faster, ultimately creating more value for customers and building value for their company, quite frankly, right? Like I always joke
Hmm.
around that had we not made some of the mistakes we made, we probably would have had another few zeros on the end of our enterprise value at the time we were acquired in
Hmm.
late 2018.
Got
So
you.
that's just kind of like how I like spending my time now is, helping those founders, learn from the pitfalls of what
Got you.
what I went through. Yeah.
Got you, and I definitely don't want to brush over that acquisition. Like, just that is a big success. Like, still a lot of mistakes, but still being acquired is like still a big deal, especially just as a startup founder. And this was your first company.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was really blessed to have been able to make it through, so to
Mhm.
speak, to the other side.
Yeah.
There was certainly parts of our journey, and I'm sure most of our board members would attest that there was definitely no shortage of like near death experiences. Like it
Mhm.
was a really expensive business, right? Like
Mhm.
you think about like anybody servicing the government, they're slow to change.
Mhm.
The funding mechanisms are really complex. They can take a long time. It's
Mhm.
not predictable, right? And all that predictability, by the way, creates an issue for the lion's share of SaaS investors,
Yep.
right? Software investors who want predictability. They want to understand like how it goes from 0 to 1 and 1 to 5 and 5 to 10 million. Like,
Mhm.
and that was really hard for us to do
Yep.
because of the way government dollars are allocated, quite frankly.
Got you.
So,
Okay. Okay.
yeah.
Got you. Got you. Okay. Well, evolution of a product within what was that, 15 minutes. Okay. So I really want to zoom back out because I know like now you're working as the CEO founder of Dinner Growth, right? And you focus on working with startup founders, like you said, and really helping them avoid those pitfalls that you kind of went through to make sure they get as many zeros as they can, as if they're going through an acquisition and making sure they sell them. But I know it's bigger than the money for you.
No doubt.
So, can you just talk about, what you've seen just working with startup founders up to this point, and just like how you've been able to help them avoid those pitfalls in a little bit more detail?
So I would tell you after 3 or so years of doing this now that like the mistakes are consistent.
Hmm.
Right? Like I actually, if I can be, I'm often really hard on myself, and everybody else around me will be like, hey, dude, like what you went through, everybody goes through. And they are right in that,
Hmm.
right? Like, left to our own vices, founders are going to make the mistakes
Yep.
largely that I made, right? Like, chasing the new shiny object all the time,
Hmm.
building product sometimes in a vacuum. I don't think we had less of that issue at SceneDoc because I think we stayed very close to our users.
Hmm.
But plenty of mistakes around go to market, right? Like not having your ideal customer really identified,
Hmm.
defined, and stay loyal to.
Yep.
Like hiring folks ahead of when we should have hired them, right? There's just like all those sort of quintessential mistakes that I think a lot of tech founders make
Hmm.
that, I see almost ubiquitously almost at every startup.
Hmm. And I guess, like how do you just go about having those conversations with them? Like what is that like? Because, just as a
Yeah.
founder, you believe in something so much where it's just like, no, you're trying to stop me from reaching my dream. Like how do you go about really having those conversations and just saying like, hey, I'm trying to help you, man. I see you believe in this dream, but if you're telling somebody to do something else, and even though you have the experience, you've done it before, you've had the pitfalls, like how do you go about like really listen, just please listen to me. Like, how do you go about doing that?
So you nailed it right there. Like, as cliche as it sounds, like you just have to be authentic and actually give a shit and be empathetic.
Mhm,
And I think that like approach is everything.
mhm,
Tonality is everything. And I
mhm.
think that like you're right. Part of what you said is how do you disarm the founder as
Yes,
quickly as
yes.
possible so
Yep.
that we can all be vulnerable and open with each other. And I
Mhm.
think like much of like you and I know this, like as leaders, that's the way you get the best out of your team, right?
Yes.
I
Yep.
I I lead that way, and it wasn't like that from day one. But
Mhm,
I certainly today I would say like anything anybody who worked for me or with me would tell you that Alex cares.
mhm.
Because I do. Like, and I think that I try to demonstrate the value of letting your hair down, wearing your heart on your sleeve, being vulnerable,
Mhm,
being uber transparent, even to a
mhm,
fault sometimes.
mhm.
But like, if I do that, most of the time the founder starts doing that, and that's where like the magic happens. That's when we can start making progress. If that
Got you.
makes sense. Yeah.
Gotcha. No, that makes sense. That makes sense. Just really, just like you said, just being authentic, like making sure
Yeah.
you're not just like talking at them. You are speaking with them about this experience and what it's going to be like and what you've been through. So yeah, that makes sense. And early in our first conversation before this, we talked about this underdog, right? And that was something you said a couple of times in our conversation. So can you talk about what you mean by underdog? Because I think just as a founder or entrepreneur, you kind of just set yourself up to be an underdog. Like a couple people believe in you,
Yeah.
a lot of people are just
Yep.
like, I don't know if he's gonna make it, or what are you? This is crazy. What are you doing? And what does that mean to you?
So it's funny you say that because I was in a meeting with like this serial entrepreneur a month or
Mhm,
so ago, just before the break. And I said, hey, I'm going to be transitioning what we do at Dana Growth
mhm,
to spending more of my time working with underdog founders. And
mhm.
his knee jerk reaction was like, every tech founder is just an underdog. And I said, no, I just completely disagree. Right. And so, like, walk with me on this for a second. Um, I grew up in Toronto.
Mhm,
I grew up with two loving parents, afforded most opportunities to go to school. I wouldn't say it was like with a silver spoon in my mouth by any stretch, but because we had to work for a lot, and that was like built into the DNA of from my parents.
mhm.
But like we were afforded different opportunity, right? Just by being in Toronto. I think it's like as simple as that.
Yep.
Bound by a good family. If you pull out of the valley, New York, Toronto, London, England, I don't know, places like this, right?
Mhm,
There are mature ecosystems for tech founders, but there are swaths of founders that are not born to that.
mhm,
They haven't been afforded the opportunities to have access the way I have access.
Mhm.
And so when I think about underdog founders, I'm thinking about the founder that might be somewhere in the Americas, but grew grew up under resourced,
Mhm.
underserviced.
Mhm.
I'm thinking about the young entrepreneurs that might be somewhere in Africa, India, in our homeland of India. Like, and I now met with a lot of these folks, right? Like, we're into
Mhm.
now helping about a dozen companies that are from these types of environments. And guess what? They're all smart. They all have grit. They have great ideas,
Mhm.
but they access sometimes the ability. Sometimes it's the inner game and just confidence straight up that they lack, but they don't have
Yep.
access to the rooms I've been in and the rooms I've been afforded to be in.
Mhm.
So like that, it comes in different formats to me. It's
Mhm.
like access to the right information at the right time. It's access to the right coaches and mentors. It's access to the right investors that
Mhm.
are also good human beings, right? And so like I've
Mhm.
decided over the last few months that what really gets me, Alex, moving and what really makes me happy is this notion of helping that type of founder go from ideation to scaling a business. And
Mhm.
if there's liquidity or a lifestyle business that we can help them build, guess what happens? It's not just that founder that has gets upside, right?
Mhm.
In these types of environments that I'm describing, the underdog founder has a community behind them that almost relies on their success. And
Yeah.
so like creating liquidity there just has like far more of a ripple effect than
Mhm.
when Alex his company got acquired,
Yeah.
right? It's just different. And so that's kind of where Dana Growth is about to go.
Yeah, like and I like the way that you put emphasis on the community aspect because I think community brings exposure. And I was a part of an incubator in Chicago while I was there, and I would see kind of like those underdog founders there, and just like not even being well versed in things like Chat GPT. You would think because it's a tech
Yeah, yeah,
incubator that everybody knows about Chat GPT, APIs, all these other things, and it's just like no, and I only know that because I worked at tech, and that was because I wanted to do something different. But it is important to have that community because I think that because I worked in tech, I built a community, and that exposure is really important. And that exposure opens up possibilities. Like it helps with kind
no
of those
doubt.
mindset things that you hinted towards. Like, it's like, oh, I didn't even think about it like that. Or I can see what's possible now because I was able to talk to somebody who's a CTO or worked as a CTO at Salesforce or some well-known tech company. And I think, yeah, community that has been something I've always had a heavy emphasis on because community brings so much more growth and so much more people. Like even if that product or that service doesn't work out, if you have a community behind you, you will find that next
Yeah,
opportunity.
yeah, no
It will,
doubt.
it will, or it will spark some type of new idea within you. Like, oh, like I know so and so, we talk every week. Let me pitch this idea to him to see what he thinks. So it's a lot of opportunity that comes with that. So I love that.
Community is also how we scale, right? I mean, the
Yeah.
software guy in me would say, okay, Alex has this great business called Dana Growth, and I'm
Hmm.
exchanging my time for compensation, right?
Hmm.
But that doesn't scale, right?
Hmm.
So now what I'm thinking about is like, how do we give? And by the way, I don't know if I explained that, but like Dana in my wife's mother tongue in Hindi means to give.
Hmm.
That's where the name Dana came from.
Hmm.
So how do I've been giving for the last
Hmm.
couple of years my
Yeah.
knowledge and the mistakes I've made and my know-how and network and ecosystem, but like how do I now do that at scale? And to
Yeah.
me, the only way to do that is through community, right? Because
Hmm.
it can't just rely on me. We need smart guys like you, Bryant, to be
Yeah.
part of theirs. Because I got to tell you, every one of these companies would benefit from speaking to a guy like you,
Hmm. Yeah.
right?
Well, I
And
appreciate.
so
I
like
appreciate.
that's how we start to shape and accelerate and build momentum for these folks that need that help.
Got you. Got you. And underdog has a very like I guess it can if you hear it initially, it can have a negative connotation to it. But do you think you could talk about just some of the advantages that having that underdog, title can bring for a founder?
tenacity, right? I don't know. The first thing that comes out is like if you can be tenacious, like that can
Yep.
be your North Star, right? I mean, think
Mhm.
about all the different examples you and I have in our lives of people that were the quote unquote underdog, the one that
Mhm.
was seen as the person that would not make it,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
I'm sure there was
Yeah.
parts of you and I's life that were like that. I mean, there were certainly parts of my life where I was treated
Yeah.
as one. I wouldn't classify myself as the underdog I was describing, but
Mhm.
to be discounted,
Mhm.
I think for tenacious people becomes the accelerant, right? It
Mhm.
becomes the method, the driver for me to be like, fuck you. I'm gonna go and prove you wrong. Like
Yep.
this is how I'm gonna go out and do it, and I'm just not gonna stop until we get it done.
Yeah, yeah, I would definitely say I was probably the underdog title applies to me. I think when I was going through my quarter life crisis, 25 years old, didn't really know what I wanted to do. I wasn't a big talker, and I didn't know what to do next for myself professionally. I was working in the traditional education space. It's like I don't want to do this anymore. This is a bunch of BS, like very bureaucratic. You literally have to wait for people to retire in order to kind of get any change done. So, I just kind of hit a brick wall. And then from there, I was like, all right, like, let me see what tech is talking about. Like, I wanted to really figure out like how I can be a part of the tech. Do I need to learn how to code? Do I need to learn how to, design something? Like, do I need to learn graphic design? And it turns out that my education background actually helped because I was able to become a part of work at a tech boot camp as a coach. I was like, oh, like, and as soon as that happened, as soon as became a part of that community, that ecosystem, like my mind started, that creativity came out. I was doing group coaching, I was doing one-to-one coaching, I was doing facilitation, I was doing learning experience design. I was like, oh, this is like the thing that I've been searching for. But that took me just having some type of like curiosity, some type of determination to figure it out, right? And that's actually what led me to where I am today. So I think, yes, that
Mm,
underdog title is just like, how can you do the most when you don't have a lot, if anything? Like, and I think that's a founder story. Like any founder would tell you that. But I think that when you kind of are up against like just facing a wall, like, how are you going to run through it? Like I was in New York
yeah.
City at the time. Like it was kind of like it was a new city. I never planned on being in New York City, but it was like, all right, I got to figure this out. I can't just sit up here and just be miserable. So yeah, that determination, that tenacity is something that I think, yeah, it is, I think, built in that underdog founder.
And now look at you. I mean,
Yeah.
you are the epitome of Dana. Like now, what you're doing now is taking that
Mhm.
tenacity, taking all your hard
Mhm.
work, taking all the lessons you've learned now, and now you're starting to spread those gems, right,
Yeah,
through your coaching. And I think that's amazing.
for sure, for sure. Appreciate that. So a part of that underdog I guess title, I want to talk about just leadership, just you as a business leader, as a startup leader, as an advisor, like what does, when you think about purposeful leadership, what does that mean for you? What does that look like for you? Because leadership is something that we talk about a lot today. But I want you, as a person who has successfully started a company, got acquired, and now started another company, what is purposeful leadership mean to you?
Hmm. So So I go to the word itself, right?
Hmm.
Like purpose,
Hmm.
right? And I think that in any team, in order to effectively lead and to like create success within that team, everybody needs to have that sense of purpose.
Hmm.
Like, why are we doing this?
Hmm.
And I think that's like, I don't know how you feel about it, but like, I mean, I can draw on so many examples of some horrible leaders I've been around
Hmm.
that do not get everybody on the same sheet of music,
Hmm.
right? And I think that's sometimes that's the hard work that's overlooked. We just expect, okay, we're going to hire smart people and they're going to be able to all just execute.
Hmm.
And then they fail to roll out what is the vision for the team or for the company. Why
Hmm.
why are we doing what we do? What is the purpose of our work?
Hmm.
Right? And if you can do that properly and front load sort of if you front load the work with that work,
Hmm.
like I think that's a huge velocity builder. Like
Hmm.
it's game changing. And I I can recall this actually in one of my previous companies, Kumu. We're in the enterprise video space, and this was like a 25-year-old company that was publicly traded. And honestly, like when we walked in as sort of a new team, a new executive team to transform this business,
Mhm.
they lacked like having a vision and a mission that like all the staff could rally around. And it was one of the really brilliant things our CEO Rose Bentley did was develop a purpose, develop a vivid vision for the company, and really be able to recite that to everybody so that everybody could recite it back.
Mhm.
And I'll tell you, like, if you were to have plotted this thing on the graph, like the moment we did that was the moment the company started to really grow again.
Interesting. No.
So that is like something that is, I think, deep, and it's something I'll always carry through now.
Yeah, it's interesting because like you would think that a CEO, no matter what type of CEO you are, you would have a vision, you would have a purpose, you would have a pretty thorough, like, understanding of what the values you want to upkeep in your company. So how do you get in these roles? How do you maintain a business, not having that vision, not having that purpose? So it's very interesting, like the things that seem so not simple, but maybe obvious
Yeah,
to growing
right.
a business or a company are just kind of brushed over.
Well, that's why a lot of companies fail, right? And I'm not
Yeah.
attributing it just to this, but I mean, if you
Mhm,
think about it in the startup world, right? Like, you're like
mhm,
two nines of 99.99% chance of failure.
mhm,
I think a lot of it has to do with things like that. Some of those
mhm,
basics, right?
mhm,
The basics of like how having shared values. Like,
mhm,
oftentimes, I think we think like vision, purpose, all these kind of buzzwords, core values.
mhm.
We think of that as like what mature companies need to have. But the
Not
reality
it.
is that startups benefit from them, if not more,
Mhm.
because it gives everybody direction.
Yep.
And that is honestly, those are one of the mistakes we made is like not having direction early enough. Like it might be in the
Mhm.
founder's head, but that's why you need to take pen to paper. That's why you need to
Yep.
make this an exercise where everybody you bring into that startup understands the why,
Yep.
understands the mission and purpose, understands what we value in the company.
Mhm.
And like doing all of that actually just creates the right direction, and just helps things flow a hell of a lot better.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I'm a coach, so it's like, I'm all about vision, that like where are we going? What
Yeah,
do we
so this is
want
like obvious
where
to
do we want
you,
to
but
be?
it's
What
not,
is
right? Like
Yeah, it's
it's
but
not like
it's similar to you. I study it. So it's like, I'm studying it, then I'm trying to practice it. So it's like, all right, like why doesn't everybody know this stuff? This is obvious, right? But yeah, I got you. I
dude,
got
do this. Like the next time you meet a group of co-founders in a company, right? An early stage company, it's the funniest thing, but the scariest thing all at the same time. But like just go around the table and ask them, what do you want for this company? And I
really.
gotta tell you, at least based on my data set, like a high 75-80% of those co-founders will say something different.
Hmm.
And it's scary because if somebody has this, and let's go to like really basic things, like almost superficial things. If one founder, if there's two co-founders, one founder is like, "Hey, I want to build a lifestyle business that like could be living on for the next 100 years," and then the other founder is like, "I can't wait to like exit this business in 5 years," right? Like think about like how that's going to affect the
Yep.
day-to-day management and growth of that business,
Yep. Got you.
right?
Yeah. That's actually I'm gonna
So
start doing that. I'm in Atlanta, so I'm gonna go to Atlanta Tech Village. I'm gonna go experiment with that to see the
do
response.
it, do it. And like let me know what you see, because maybe I'm wrong, but like I'd say in my data set, I've seen this happen. And a lot of it has to do with a stage of growth. Maybe like
Mhm,
later stage tech companies, I think, are gonna have less of this issue. But
mhm.
again, even then, like you have to constantly revisit these things
Evolution.
because
Yep, evolution.
evolution
Yep,
happens, right? And so
yep.
like fatigue sets in,
Mhm,
people's priorities and life changes, right?
mhm.
So,
Yep, give people a
it's
chance to
something,
reevaluate if they wanna be a part of this company
right?
anymore, and if not, that's fine. We gotta get somebody that's better aligned, like, it's about growth, evolution. That's what it's about.
No doubt. And it should never
Yeah.
stop.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think you've kind of already answered the question of like one of the I'm gonna ask you again anyway. So what do you think is the biggest challenge in being a leader? You know, just from your experience, what was one of the biggest challenges that you had in being a leader?
Hmm. I think a lot about like consistency,
Hmm.
and I hate to pull it back to like parenting, but like I know like when I go off and I'm less consistent with my kids, it creates an issue with the kids. I think like
Hmm.
consistency in how you parent is important. I think just the
Hmm.
same, it's like really important to be like consistent in how you're leading. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't evolve, right? We're constantly
Hmm.
trying to like get
Of
better. So
course.
I don't think that
Yep.
should be misconstrued with staying stagnant.
Yep.
But if you have that growth mindset, always wanting to get better, but then always translate that back to being like, okay, if we're going through change, how do
Hmm.
we communicate that early enough so that people understand the change
Hmm.
and then get back into being consistent about it? If
Yep.
that makes sense. Like,
Makes
I
sense.
think like early on in my career, I had that, I call it a very typical first time CEO and first time founder mentality of like, always expecting that the team would shift as I thought a priority changed.
Hmm.
And so maybe it actually comes down to two things: over communicating,
Yep.
right? Being really clear. That can be a difficult thing for leaders sometimes because we're so busy on executing and, putting out the fire of the day or the morning or that afternoon that like we forget to over
Hmm.
communicate and that there's human beings that we're leading that actually deserve a lot of communication. And then once we get there, how do you be as consistent as possible so that it doesn't turn into this roller coaster for your team at all times?
Yeah. Yeah, and I want to say I like how you started with your family, like because I think
Mm.
leadership comes in many different forms. It's not just about how you lead a team, but it's also about like just how you lead your life, just as an individual. Like I
Yeah,
like how you started
right.
with the family, like communicating with my kids, like that has to take the same approach as me over communicating with my team or my organization or me being a CEO. And I'm glad you hit on that. Like that, those things are connected. Yeah, they're always connected. And how we show up with leadership at work is a big determinant in how we show up in leadership at home too. I'm glad
No
you pointed
doubt.
that out. I'm glad you pointed that
No
out.
doubt. I mean, if things are tough at home, it's really hard to show up and be
Hmm.
great at work, right?
Hmm.
And vice versa. And so yeah, like I mean, I always draw on just the benefit I had of having a great wife and my wife Sashi. Like she's just
Hmm.
she's like a stable, steady hand to
Hmm.
our home. And that has,
Hmm.
on one side of the coin, afforded me every opportunity to go and build all these companies and be as involved I
Hmm.
am entrepreneurially, but also like at home to know that we have a certain level of stability that's required and that she requires from me as soon as I walk back into the walls of the home. Right. So
Hmm.
like I think yeah, anyway, that I think it's super critical to make sure that home's in a good spot so that, the rest of your life stays in a good spot.
For sure, for sure. And just to add on to that question, and you kind of hit on it earlier, like what type of leader do you strive to be? Because you talked about the vulnerability, you talked about transparency, you talked about over communicating. But if you could kind of sum up, like what type of leader do you strive to be, and how has that shown up, not just at work, but also just like you as a person, like throughout your whole life?
Mhm.
How would you sum that up?
I wanna leave people better than the way I found them,
Got you. Okay.
right? Like, and I do think about that. I do think about, okay, like in this chapter, are they gonna be in a place of growth after we're done?
Mm,
Right. And
okay,
I
growth,
like I
growth.
think about the other day I was on a pod and somebody asked me what was like the most rewarding part about building Scene Doc, my startup.
Hmm.
And I said one of the two things was like every time I'm on LinkedIn and I get to see somebody, a scene docker, we call them scene dockers. Every time I get to see one of those guys or gals blossoming in their professional careers today,
Hmm.
like it just it fills my cup, it warms my heart. It's just an
Hmm.
amazing thing to see. And so, like, that to me says that we did a lot wrong, but we did a lot of good too, to
Yep.
shape human beings
Yep.
to get to that next level of their professional career.
Hmm.
And like, so like that is something I always, try to invoke through my
Growth.
leadership.
It
Yeah.
sounds like growth, self improvement, change,
Yeah.
evolution, all those things.
Right. Because that's what was afforded to me, right? If I
Yeah.
think about the best mentors and coaches I've had,
Hmm.
they've all like helped me go from A to D, or
Hmm.
A to, M. And so like, just, growth mindset, keep moving, right? Keep
Hmm.
moving at all times.
For
And
sure.
so, yeah, that's the way I try to lead, at least. I think it's still work in progress, no doubt.
Oh no, for sure. Like one of my biggest values is growth. So just every 6 months I'm looking to change in some type of way or change something,
Mhm.
whether it's a routine, whether it's like just a hobby, whether it's just like, just me as a person, like how can I get better? And I think that, it's a part of being a coach, but also just being a person, like just being curious about you is like a big thing. I think, especially as a founder, as an entrepreneur, because as you've probably
Dude, that's
experienced.
dope. I have to
Yeah.
stop you there.
What?
Curious about you.
Yeah.
Like, we always think about
Yeah.
curiosity being an external thing, right?
Hmm.
And you're right. I don't think sometimes I give enough time to myself to be curious about me.
Hmm.
That's
And
interesting.
it's not a selfish thing either. It's just that curiosity about you helps you understand others around you. And what I mean by that is just simply like, taking the time to understand like what got you to this point is not going to be the thing that's going to help you move forward, like just as a professional, as an entrepreneur, as a just person. Like you always have to be evolving because you are all, like literally your body's growing every day, like it's crazy, right? So we don't even think about it like that, but your body's changing, your body's growing every day. So why
Mm,
shouldn't just the mind also, right? So because if we become, stuck in our ways, we begin to cling on like to, oh, like remember like back in 2017, that was a time we cling on to those things, and it's just like we're never gonna get those back, right? It's about evolution. It's about change. It's not about chasing feelings. It's about just embracing like what is this new version. And I think as I've learned in these last 6 months of full time entrepreneurship, is that I have to be so aware of my self-sabotaging behaviors, right? The hyper rational, like being like very like hard on myself, not giving myself grace to be like, all
mm,
right, nothing got done today. It's okay though. It's okay because we're gonna get back on it tomorrow. Like just really being mindful of like how am I taking a step forward today, or what did I accomplish today? Whether it be like, I got up, I made the bed, or like, hey, like I was able to have a great call with this potential client. I was able to book this. Like it doesn't always have to be to that level, but just making sure that you understand, like give yourself grace, like notice the highlights because we usually brush over the things that are actually like a big deal. And we look back, like I'm sure you going through it now, like, oh, like we did a lot of great stuff. Like we did stuff. We did great things.
mm.
So it's really important to me.
It's exactly what I went through. I remember one of my first investors, Tim, used to say, like, dude, enjoy the journey, enjoy the journey. And I remember I would look at Adrian, my business partner, and we would like literally laugh, like, what the fuck does that even mean? Right? Like,
Yeah.
enjoy the journey. Like, we're always so busy and like,
Mhm,
building, that you just forget. And yeah, like you're right. Like, it's been 5 years now since that company is acquired. There's probably
mhm.
not a day that goes by where I'm not reflecting on the journey. And yeah,
Yeah,
some of that showing up in the writing I do, and
yeah.
certainly showing up in the meetings I have with
Mm,
our founders and
mhm.
startups and companies I work with. And it has been fun actually now to
Yeah,
reflect on it. I wish I was doing more of what you were saying though, like
yeah,
in near real time doing that reflection.
yeah, but
But it's
I'm
hard.
su I'm sure you're smiling in those meetings though, like, you're like, "Ah, man, that's exactly what I went through." I'm glad you said that. You
Oh,
probably
dude, it's so
smile
crazy.
every
I
time.
do
You just
chuckle a
smile to
lot.
yourself.
I'm sure when I'm on Zoom, some founders are like, "What the heck's this guy smiling about?" And it's so serious, right? And
You
I'm
gotta
like,
have
"No,
fun
because
with
I
it.
yeah."
You gotta have fun. It's a journey, man. It is a
Yeah,
journey.
no doubt, man. No doubt. It's been
Um,
fun learning a little bit more about your journey, and we're gonna do some more of this offline,
yeah.
because I want to dig in more on your journey, man. I This has been so fun.
Yeah, man, it's been a roller coaster. And I just really have one, right? Yeah, just one more question for you.
Fair enough, man.
Um,
Shoot.
so we are fresh in 2024,
Mhm.
and just as an advisor, a mentor, a coach, a business owner, what is your intention for this year? Not goals. Like I'm not saying like, hey, like tell me how much money you want to make this year. You'll get
Yeah,
that.
no.
You'll
Yeah,
get
yeah.
that. But what is the intention like for this year for you? If you could sum up your intentions, like what do you want to do this year?
Okay. So there's two sort of macro things, but which I think are micro actually.
Mhm.
One is to be more present with my kids. Like,
Mhm.
and I think like 2023, I was a lot better than
Mhm.
22. So that's a building block that I still want to like improve on,
Mhm.
and that's like, anytime I'm in Toronto, I want to make sure that I'm at every practice, at every game, just being there for
Mhm.
Cameron and Kendall, my son and my
Mhm.
daughter. Secondarily to that, and it's the thing, like it's crazy, even as I say this, like the thing that is actually most important is actually my wife. Like I
Mhm.
always glaze over it because I just take it for granted. When
Mhm.
people ask me about like the things that are important, I always go to my kids. But the reality is that like I gotta equally invest in like being a better husband. So
Mhm.
that's kind of the stuff at the home.
Gotcha.
Um, Professionally, it's actually a really pretty singular thing, and that is I want to get this community up and running.
Mhm.
And so stay tuned for more on this. Like we're almost there.
Mhm.
Um, I think we're like a month away from being able to like officially launch this community. But
Mhm.
that is going to be like the next wave of Dana growth. Again, moving away from just blocking and tackling um, sort of through consulting and advisory and
Mhm.
moving to it being something that can scale. Like, and when I mean that something can scale, it's the giving at scale.
Gotcha.
That's going to be the next manifestation that we're going to, really start to grow and spend a lot more time building in 24.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So with the family, making sure it's taking the time with the kids, being there for them, taking the time with the wife, being there for her, and with then the growth, just making sure you're building the community, like building the platform up. And I'm happy to help in building that community any way I can. Like I think in the
I
conversation
appreciate you.
we had,
Yeah.
in the conversation we had about it, I want to learn more, and we'll talk offline about it. But yeah, I'm happy to help out any way I can.
I already got you signed up.
I'm thankful. I'm thankful.
No, I'm equally thankful. Thanks so much, man. This
Yeah,
has been
yeah, for
fun.
sure. And we got we got some love in the chat. So Chris, thank you for being here, and thank you for that comment, man. He said I really appreciate the way you guys appreciate the change that make you into the path as a empathetic and personable leaders. I love to stay informed on that community as well. So you got another potential person a part of
Very
that
cool.
community. But Alex, thank you for taking the time today. Is there anything that you want to let people know about you, where to find you, anything outside of the community that you're building that you want to share?
Yeah, I mean, publicly, I'm on LinkedIn. That's how you and I met.
Hmm.
People can go check me out there.
Hmm.
To the extent that people are in tech that are listening to this or the recording thereafter, danagrowth.com, DENAGROWTH.com. There's a free mechanism to connect with me there and get on a call with me.
Cool.
Just like any way I can help. This is how I'm spending time. So
Cool.
that's it,
Cool.
man.
Cool. Well, thank you, Alex, and thank you for everybody that attended. And yeah, reach out to Alex if you all have any question. He is very active on
And
LinkedIn,
reach out
and
to Bryant if you want some guidance
I
and
appreciate that.
coaching. I think that's what it's about too. So,
I appreciate that. I
yep.
appreciate that. Yes, reach out to me if you're looking for coaching. But thank you all. Have a good rest of your week. Stay tuned for another live soon come. All right.
Peace, y'all. Take
Peace.
care.